Thank you all for having me here to talk a bit about technology transfer and how the DoD innovates in order to prepare for future conflicts. So, uh, so technology transfer, is it's a term of art. It means when we spin technology out to the private sector from the government, and then there's also technology transition, which is related, which is when we spin technology into the government to the warfighter from the private sector. But often both both are kind of encompassed just by saying technology transfer. Either way, so spinning out and spinning in, and it's a key tool that we have, to partner with the private sector and other non-federal entities. So if we could go to the again next slide.
Okay.
And I just want to, so yeah, my name's Eric, and I'm a cyber operations law attorney at U.S. Cybercommand. Just want to give that disclaimer that I'm here in the views I express today do not necessarily represent those of the U.S. Air Force, U.S. Cybercommand, or the Department of Defense. Next slide. And also it doesn't. He's rolling the slides. Okay, got it. Obs, do you have next slide?
Yeah, I've got the background slide, chief capabilities and data management. So this is the third slide in your deck.
Oh, it doesn't show up on our end. Huh. All right, cool. So we're on the third slide. That's great. So yeah, and also this does not constitute legal advice. It's just merely for educational, informational purposes. So my background is, I was chief of cyber IP law at the 6th Cyberspace Wing for about 3 years before I came to the U.S. Cyber Command. And there I negotiated 51 cooperative research and development agreements, Kratas, and 3 patent license agreements. And those are different technology transfer tools that you have in your toolkit as a federal laboratory. So we're going to kind of start off with giving you sort of an application of technology transfer in this lecture, because we don't have time to go into all ways you could potentially use technology transfer to help the Department of Defense innovate. So we're going to kind of use operational technology threats as sort of as an example. And so in 2015, there were attackers who did operations against Ukrainian power companies, and those operations spread to those power companies' supervisory control and data acquisition SCADA systems on the company's networks, and they use that to disrupt the generation of electricity. And this caused a failure of power for more than 225,000 people for more than 6 hours. So that's an example of attackers going after their industrial control systems, their operational technology systems. And so operational technology threats, that's basically when someone's attacking computer network to cause an effect in the physical world, right? So operational technology is when ones and zeros and cause lights to turn off or valves to open or close, things like that. And you also had an event in 2021. This was an incident in Florida where there was a hacker that attempted to essentially poison the water supply, and it was prevented ultimately. But if it had been successful, that could have endangered the lives of 15,000 people in Florida. And these sort of incidents highlight the real importance of us developing tactics and techniques and procedures to defend against threats to operational technology. And this is something we need. Our forces, our cyber protection teams at U.S. Cyber Command need more experience operating in different types of ICS environments. And we also should be working with critical infrastructure so they can develop better tactics to help harden and help better protect their networks. And technology transfer is a mechanism for public-private partnership we can use to do that. So technology transfer is part of a larger set of options we have for interacting with non-federal entities. So this is the government contracting cone. You can find it on the Defense Acquisition University website, the DAU, and it is truly beautiful in all of its glory. It's interactive. If you go on the website, you can click on the different sections. You can read about all these different vehicles. Everything in blue is part of the FAR, the Federal Acquisition Regulation. That's sort of what you think of when you think of government contracting. And then everything in green, those are the non-FAR vehicles. So those are things like Kratas, Cooperative Research Development Agreements. That's PIAs, like Partnership Intermediary Agreements, things like other transactions, OTs, and other vehicles like that. So I work for U.S. Cyber Command, and Cyber Command has what's known as acquisition authority, so it can enter into contracts that can bind the U.S. government. It also, under the new Department of Defense instruction 5535.08, Cyber Command and all other combatant commands can now also establish their own technology transfer programs. So their acquisition authority lets them enter into sort of, FAR contracts, but then this new technology transfer authority lets them enter things like Kratas and education partnership agreements and patent license agreements, software license agreements, and partnership intermediary agreements. So US Cybercom and the services, what's sort of the relationship there? So, it's probably a review for some of the folks listening in on this, but, there's, the services, they organize, train, and equip forces, and they present them to the combatant command, which in this case is US Cybercom. And most cyber acquisition occurs in the services, but US Cybercom has a growing J9, which is the director that handles acquisition and technology. And it's growing in size, but still most services are still acquired through the services. So Goldwater Nichols was an act that was in the 80s, and it established the command structure that we have today. So, services, they provide these forces to the combatant commands. I think one of the most well-known combatant commands is Central Command, CENTCOM. It covers all operations that are occurring from Afghanistan to Egypt. And so most operations that occur within that area of responsibility, AOR, are under the commander of US CENTCOM's authority. And then you also have EUCOM that handles all operations, or most operations in the European sort of area of operations. But then you have functional combatant commands. So those are geographic ones. And you have functional combatant commands like Cybercom, which, although it's not governing a specific geographic space, the commander of US Cybercom is sort of in charge of operations that are involving the cyber domain in general. And then you also have Space Command, right? A Space Command is actually a geographic combatant command. It's everything 100 kilometers over the Earth. These falls within the Space Command's area of operations. So federal laboratories. So a federal laboratory, it's a facility where the substantial purpose of it is the performance of research, development, or engineering by employees of the federal government. This definition is very broadly defined. There's a court case called Babbitt, where it turns out Yellowstone National Park is a federal lab. So Yogi Bear gets a lab. So does Los Alamos National Lab, their lab, Rome Labs up in New York. And the 67 Cyberspace Wing and the 68 Cyberspace Wing are also considered federal laboratories. And so what, can we actually play it just so the animation works? Oh, what?
Okay,
It's working.
Is
Okay,
it working now?
Yeah, okay.
Okay.
Okay, so build out one. So what is a Crata? Is it a rocking Crata? No, that's not it. Next slide. Is it like a Crata? No, that's not it. It's a cooperative research and development agreement, Crata. So these are all different technology transfer mechanisms. You have patent license agreements, software license agreements, and Kratas. And patent license agreement, that's when you have a patent for an invention, and then we want to license that out to a non-federal entity to give them the legal right to utilize that invention. Same thing with software license agreements. That's when we have in the DoD a trade secret software that's essentially been protected like a trade secret, and then we also license that out to the private sector or a non-federal entity. And we can use Kratas to support patent license agreements and software license agreements to help allow federal employees on federal time to engage in work to help further commercialize the technology. Because all these authorities come back to the 1980s when the US was losing competitively to the Germans and the Japanese. And Congress was telling, Department of Defense, Department of Energy, and NASA, you have these large R&D budgets. You need to push all this technology out to the private sector because you have a lot of patents, but you're not using them. And so they gave us these two tools, the patent license agreement and the Crata, as tools to push that technology out in the private sector. But then over time, the private sector has also gained a lot of they've had increasing research and development budgets compared to the federal government. So then now it's also important to think about transition, spinning in technology from the private sector to the warfighter. So we use these technology transfer authorities sort of both ways, to spin out and to spin in technology. So Kratas are a contract in the sense that there's offer, acceptance, consideration, but the FAR, Federal Acquisition Regulations, do not apply. Funds cannot be transferred from the government to the collaborator. That's the name of the collaborator is a non-federal entity that we're working with. They're exempt from procurement competition requirements that are associated with the FAR. However, you cannot use Kratas to circumvent the procurement process. So what's the difference between a Crata and a procurement contract? So a Crata is when you have a federal lab, that'd be Cyber Command, with a non-federal entity, where they both bring the resources together, right? Personnel, services, facilities, equipment, or other resources, including data, but not funds. Well, the federal laboratory can't provide funds, but they can provide all those other resources, and the non-federal entity can provide funds and all those other resources towards the conduct of collaborative research and development efforts, which are consistent with the missions of the laboratory, except that that term doesn't include a procurement contract. And so what a procurement contract is, that's when the principal purpose of the instrument is to acquire by purchase, lease, or barter property or services for the direct benefit or use of the government. And so what's the meaning of research and development when it comes to Kratos? It's an undefined term. The technology transfer community generally interprets it very broadly. Now the 678 cyberspace wing, and you can Google online. There's a report that came out in the spring. It talks a lot about the activities they were doing in 2021. But basically they sort of fall into four buckets what those two cyber wings have been doing. First, they have their Spinout traditional Kratos in support of their patent license agreements. They have 3 patent license agreements, and they're using the Kratos as a way to help share additional data and to work with those companies to commercialize the technology. They have like 2 different cybersecurity technologies they've licensed out to 3 companies. Then you have sort of Spinin Kratos, where they're working with companies to kind of help further develop potential solutions, and to explore the realm of the possible for offensive and defensive cyber operations. And then their third type are these critical infrastructure Kratos they have, where they're partnering with the power company or the water company, and they're working to develop new TTPs to better defend industrial control systems. And the fourth type of Kratos that those wings have is they're called approved product list Kratos. So that's what so the Defense Information Security Agency, DISA, what they do is DISA has an approved products list, and if a product's on that list, then it's sort of approved to be used on the DoD, Department of Defense Information Network, and the 346 Test Squadron within the 67th. They perform testing under Kratos with private entities, and they do testing for cybersecurity, interoperability, and then they give their report to DISA, and that can potentially lead to them being included on the DISA approved products list. And as part of that those Kratos, the 67th gets paid money by the private entity in order to reimburse them for their costs for doing the testing. So that's kind of an example of what you could do with Kratos. So when Kratos can go wrong, you have Spectrum Sciences and Software versus United States. That was basically the lesson of that case was don't take a private entity's trade secrets that they bring into the Crata and then put them into a subsequent follow-on FAR solicitation as government furnished information. So the technology you bring into the Crata, you keep. So the government brings technology in. If the non-federal entity brings their own proprietary information in, that they keep. And then what you create together under the Crata is then shared. So new things that are created are shared, but what you bring into it, you keep. So then there's this case called Chemical Services versus EPA. That basically just stands for the proposition that, Crata can't really be a procurement contract. There has to be, you can't just be doing it just for the purpose of getting goods or services from the non-federal entity. And you have to have research and development occurring there. And research and development is an undefined term, but in that case, the companies were simply being asked to print reference materials, and these were the same reference materials they were printing under their FAR contracts. And so there was really no difference between the FAR contract and the procurement and the Crata. And so the court was like, it's too similar. So the company has standing to challenge those Kratas. So it's okay to enter into Kratas with existing contractors of the entity. It's just there's just a process for sort of deconflicting it. So you go to in the Code of Federal Regulations, there's a process for trying to determine whether the Crata and the existing contract are sufficiently distinct. You want to have different. You don't want there to be identical tasks. You don't want to have the same intellectual property being provided by that other party. You don't want to have the same personnel working on it. And so there are these various factors that come into play to do that sort of sufficiently distinct test. But it's important to lean forward though, because we can partner with non-federal entities. Yes, and if they are existing contractors, that's fine. And we may want to partner with them on a different project to explore the realm of the possible for things like offensive, defensive, cyber. And so that's how we can innovate with Kratas, even if we have existing contracts with them, because sometimes it can be difficult to interact with the private sector on kind of exploring new ideas. And Kratos are one of your tools to allow for that communication bilaterally, bidirectionally. Now you have partnership and community agreements as well. So that's under 15 USC 3715. That's a Title 15 PIA. A PIA is when the federal lab partners with a non-federal entity that is associated with a state or local government, and it performs services to increase the likelihood of successful cooperation between the federal laboratory and small businesses and certain academic institutions. And an example of a PIA is actually Dreamport. So US Cybercom has a PIA with the Maryland Innovation and Security Institute, MISI, and it provides them access to what they call Dreamport. And that's actually the facility I'm at right now, non-endorsement, but this is where this this talk is taking place at MISI. And this is helping encourage folks to engage in technology transfer. And there's a kind of an open question like what services you can provide under a PIA, because then the statute says you can perform services. It's not explicitly kind of laid out. Now we have a Department of Defense instruction. It kind of gives some guidance as to what it means to perform services. That's an area, there's always a lot of discussion about that. So I have a concept paper. I think it was sent out basically about Kratos, can be a tool for public-private convergence on cybersecurity. These are my key points. We can use Kratos to enter into public-private partnerships with critical infrastructure companies, develop TTPs for different types of operational technology networks. We can send our cyber protection teams to work with those entities and gain familiarization with different types of ICS environments, because water is different than heat, which is different than electric, different, and there's also more modern systems, older systems, and we want our cyber protection teams to have that experience and familiarity with the different types of environments, so that if they ever get called in as part of like a DISCA, Defense Support of Civil Authorities request from Department of Homeland Security, or if they're asked to, as part of hunt forward operations abroad, they're asked by our partner nations to go and help them defend their, to do hunts on their networks. Our folks could be more familiar with different types of industrial control system networks. That'd be, very valuable for them. And by partnering with them, we can also incidentally help harden their networks. So we're working with them, kind of sharing and doing tradecraft transfer with these entities. It may help them harden their own critical infrastructure. And if that critical infrastructure is supporting military installations, then that can help mission assurance, help us be able to continue to do our operations out of our own bases. Also, I just wanted to touch upon the Air Force Cyber Law Primer that got published this month. It was led by Professor Davis, Professor Biller. They led our 23-member team, which I was a member. And it's great. It provides a practitioner's perspective on both the organized, trained, equipped mission and the sort of operational mission when it comes to cyber. And happy to talk about that if there's any questions from the audience. And it does touch upon Kratos as well. Next slide. Yeah, so open to questions.
All right. Hey, that was great. Thank you so much, Eric, for that. And I've gone ahead and dropped a couple of things in the chat for folks so that they're available for folks' consumption as we move forward here. I did have we don't have any questions coming in at the moment, but I did actually have a couple of questions myself, of course. What was the driver? What was the thing, the spark that got you interested in kind of all things tech transfer? Because I'd say that you're probably one of the Air Forces and probably one of the joint leaders in this area. And so what kind of got you interested in this? What got you started?
Well, I think I got my big break with it when I was at the law firm DeVore DeMarco at the time, and I was it's a cyber and intellectual property boutique law firm, and I got the 610 cyberspace wing. There was a job opportunity to work there as the chief of cyber intellectual property law, and I applied, and it was a move from New York to San Antonio, and I left with the opportunity to kind of enter national security and the technology transfer kind of environment. I think what prepared me for that was having worked on issues related to intellectual property and cyber beforehand. I think I just learned a ton. I think when I was there, I attended the workshops as part of the Federal Laboratory Consortium and other workshops that are offered by the Air Force and the DoD. And and I just learned, it was like a water hose, but eventually, just, and I had a lot of, good mentors like Ms. Rebecca Lively, who helped hire me into the job, and I just learned a lot about it.
Well, that's pretty great, and I noticed that prior places where you've worked, 637 Cyber and 688, both are labs. Can you tell everybody a little bit about that story?
Yeah, so they may not be what you would traditionally think of as a laboratory, but they have assets and activities that occur there that do fulfill the meaning of research, development, or engineering. And because the 67th Cyberspace Wing has the 90th Cyberspace Operations Squadron, the 90th COS, and they're sort of the Air Force's in-house cyber capability development shop. And so they're creating software capabilities to help support U.S. Cyber Command and other organizations, both offensive and defensive cyber. And so they're creating, they're using code, they're creating solutions, for our problems. And so that's certainly, they're developing, engaging in development. And then they also have the 346 Test Squadron, which by its name, they engage in testing. They do cybersecurity interoperability testing. They also, they do what's known as operational test and evaluation, OT&E. And so that's kind of an example of what they do that constitutes research and development.
That's outstanding. Now, one of the apparent advantages of Kratos, PIAs, patent license agreement, any of these other types of vehicles, is that they seem to be a very good way to innovate technology quickly and get it to the user. Do you have any examples off the top of your head that you can talk at the unclass level to kind of feature some of those advantages of this type of tech transfer relationship?
Yeah, so I'd say, we were able to send, a team to do, to do a sort of a practice hunt on an ICS network. And I think that got them great sort of experience with, a new type of network that they hadn't seen before. And I think that'll make them more prepared if they ever get called upon to defend a network like that. I think another things we've done with, Kratos is, we've been able to, with critical infrastructure, we've been able to kind of look at supply chain risks, because, we can look at, equipment that they have like solar panels and look at them and say, oh, like, are there vulnerabilities in there? And we can, and then kind of work with them to do that vulnerability analysis. And that can help, the entity better prepare themselves, to mitigate threats and or mitigate vulnerabilities to prevent threats from exploiting them. Other things we can do is we can, one thing we do is we shared data with one company to, we give them data from industrial control system networks. Is what they had is they had a capability of, they had an intrusion defense system for a tank, but it didn't work on industrial control systems. And so by giving them data from industrial control system networks that we had done hunts on, by giving them that data, they were able then to sort of train that capability to move from defending the bus of a tank to potentially defending an industrial control system. And so that's kind of and eventually, we can, maybe we'll be able to transition that capability, for our own purposes, for defending Department of Defense networks.
Outstanding. So the location that you're at, you mentioned that that Dreamport is part of the kind of what you guys are doing at US Cybercom. Can you maybe elaborate a little bit on types of things that you guys are working on?
Well, yeah, I mean, we're sort of, Cybercom is growing its technology transfer program. So they already had partnership intermediary agreement authority prior to this year, but now with the new defense instruction, they now have access to full range of technology transfer authorities. And so, they're working on, creating an internal instruction to govern, entering into Kratas and patent license agreements, software license agreements, open source software licensing, as well as, managing, their use of partnership intermediary agreements. And it's, I think, they have a very active, partnership intermediary agreement with NISI, with respect to Dreamport. and they engage in, a host of activities for engagement with small businesses and academic institutions. They have what they call an academic engagement network at US Cybercom, where they partner with educational institutions, and that's all part of technology transfer. And so that's kind of, they're moving in that direction as a command, and Cybercom is not the only command that is using technology transfer. Like US Transcom has done really innovative things with Kratas with respect to orbital drops and exploring that sort of area. Space Operations Command West, although not a combatant command, they're a service entity. They've done also really great things with their commercial integration cell, with Kratas with non-federal entities and kind of coordinating with them.
Well, that's really exciting. I just remember, from my, area of practice in this particular space, like US SOCOM and some other places had several hundred of these. If people are interested in either building a program or kind of working through this, I mean, where would they start? I mean, how do they begin the process overall?
Yeah, well, it depends on where they're at, where they sit, right? So if they're part of a service entity, there's usually an organization that then delegates authority to, delegates like lab authority, the technology transfer authority. So in the Air Force, it's the commander of Air Force Research Laboratory, also known as that commander can then designate laboratories within the Air Force. So I think there's an application process by which you submit according to the Air Force instruction 61-301, and you go through you follow those instructions, you submit that to AFRL, and then they kind of review like, okay, like what are your research, development, engineering activities going on in your organization, and then you sort of make your justification for why you would want to engage in technology transfer activities like Kratos and other types of agreements, and then they decide like what authorities they'll delegate down to you. And what authorities, you have to kind of come back to them for. Even if you're not a laboratory, you can still potentially utilize technology transfer agreements. You just have to go to the organization that does have those authorities. So not every organization within the Air Force needs to have that. They can just go to Air Force Research Laboratory and they can potentially enter those agreements on your behalf. So, and so that's often how that works. And because you can, as long as it's consistent with the mission of that laboratory, and AFRL's mission is quite broad, since it's for, they support the whole Air Force, a lot can fall within that.
That's outstanding. Well, in some of those examples, I believe are unclassified. Can you maybe talk about some times where innovative products or innovative services or innovative design tools and things like that were put in the hands of the warfighter faster than sort of even the COTS or other traditional contracts mechanisms?
Well, I know a lot of work's been done with, on the health front in terms of, related to vaccines and things like that. Yeah, I know it. And, I think they've used, Kratos have been used by other parts of the federal government. And yeah, so I'd say at the, the unclassified level, just at the level that's publicly disclosed, yeah, I'd say, I'd say one example that we've done is, at the 67th, we used Kratos to help, commercialize technology that, we had done patent license agreements for. So, there was Iris, that's the, basically it's a mix of hardware and software that allows, for interrogation of networks to, better, figure out getting better situational awareness of what's going on your network. And we were able to use the Crata that allow our folks to further help develop that technology and spin it out.
Yeah, no, that's always very fascinating to me, the spin out versus spin in. The policy mechanism for that, seems to be, hey, taxpayer funds are going into developing these technologies. How do we best get it to kind of the folks, I mean, who are paying the bill, right? I mean, is that kind of I'm saying it probably well, inartfully, but I mean, what are your thoughts on that policy rationale?
Oh, 100%. Yeah, I mean, I think it's definitely a way to let taxpayers and American companies sort of reap some of the benefits of a lot of the research and development spending that the Department of Defense has been engaged in. And there's also the retention incentive aspect too, which you can't underestimate, because there's a lot of folks in the space, they do a lot of classified work. They can't talk a lot with their families about what they do. But when you help, you file patent applications, with them, with their name as one of the inventors, that's something that they can, really take pride in and tell people about. They can be like, hey, your mom or your dad, this is something they worked on, for using open source software licensing. That'll help them, spin out a technology that the whole world can utilize. And that's something very gratifying to our software developers and our operators. And it's nice for them to be able to take that pride. And yes, and if they are, and if we are engaged in patent license agreements or software license agreements, they also potentially can get paid, the royalties, a portion of the royalties that we would make from those agreements. And that's another sort of retention incentive as well.
Well, I'm sure that probably has some interesting fiscal issues, but it sounds like that's a fairly well-used mechanism, would you say?
Oh yes, absolutely. It's there's certain rules governing what you do with the funds that come from patent license agreements and software license agreements, but no, it's very much encouraged. Like the inventors usually get a very large portion of the royalties, and also software developers when it comes to software license agreements. We can also, even folks who weren't the developers or the inventors, we can also give at the director of laboratories discretion, you can give additional funds to those who help increase the technical value of the technology as well, and they can, you can make cash awards to them as well. So I think it's a great mechanism to reward those who've innovated and who put in really hard work over the years.
Well, that's really cool. I've always, and I'm probably dating myself when I say this, but BASF was a great company that took great ideas and made them better. It took a product and then added something to it that made the widget even that much more effective. So that's really cool. One of the things that was interesting about your presentation to me and other participants might be interested in this as well. And I've gone ahead and just unrestricted everybody. If you guys want to just hop in and ask questions verbally, good to go. We're no worries there. But one of the things was, with regard to critical infrastructure, I know that we've had a lot of discussion of late, and it's also been in the news quite a lot about, hey, how do we secure critical infrastructure? How does Crata, how does PLA, how do those vehicles fit into that overall rubric?
Yeah, no, it's so, because normally, we have to be careful when we interact with the non-federal entities, outside the context of an agreement or statute authority, and so we have to. The Crata allows for those sort of discussions to occur, in the context of research and development. And so, we can, share logs, information, we can share, and we have shared our packet capture data from the Air Force Information Network with non-federal entities, one for capability development, but two for, to help them, because when they look at our packet capture data, they can understand, more of the tactics of the adversary. And they can then help better prepare themselves for defending themselves against our adversaries. I think just being able to share logs, like our logs and their logs, being able to kind of figure out, how bad actors are trying to probe our networks, we can then work together on, coming up with solutions. I think that, just allowing those sort of bi-directional discussions is just really invaluable, because there's always a lot of nervousness about interacting with non-federal entities. No one wants to get into trouble. But Kratos can, provide a lot of ease and comfort and allow for those really productive discussions to occur. I think, and it's just sort of, it's just one of those authorities in your toolbox. Yeah. Another authority out there is, cyber innovative readiness training as well, and that's more useful for a one-off relationship. Like you want to go over there and perform cybersecurity services that helps with training for the unit. But with a Crata, it creates like a relationship. So cyber innovative readiness training is more of a one-off. But Crata is, that's an agreement that can last, for 1, 5, 10 years, and building that relationship with that entity and establishing trust and sort of just being able to work on problems together.
No, that's outstanding. And I also was interested in some of your remarks with regard to how Missy is, and how Dreamport is engaging with the private sector, especially in the educational space, and wondered if you might have some examples of that.
Well, I know that they hold a lot of events with supporting Cybercom entering, in support of their academic engagement network. And, they host, events on hacking, and they have hackathons and events like that. And I definitely would refer you to their website. They extensively go into that, into their work.
That's very cool. Well, we did get one question with regard to sharing of slides, and so I wanted to make sure I asked for the group. I know there's some folks that are interested in slides, or maybe even a pared down public releasable version. Might be something that we can consider as well. So over.
Yeah, well, we can work on that. I mean, they can also feel free to reach out to me via you, and we can discuss that as well.
Okay, yeah, outstanding. Yeah, no, I think everybody on this message has got a good way of getting a hold of me, and so we'll cross that bridge. So I have no further questions at this point, but I definitely want to make sure I'm opening it up for folks to drop questions into the chat box. I know this is a fairly complicated area, and I know there's probably a lot of interest in just understanding how the system and how the process works. I know that from my time over at Air Combat Command before I retired, that there was it's a complicated process, especially working with AFRL and making sure that all the patent licensing and things like that can all get worked out. And so I want to make sure that I offer to the group, who I think everybody can just go ahead and just hop on and talk if you like, for Q&A. And so I'll leave that open for a couple of minutes here before we close.
Yeah. Also, just as we're waiting for those questions, you can do classified work under Kratos, as well. It's important to point out. As long as it kind of lays that out in the agreement, and they go through, and then they have the proper background investigations and the right clearances, we do classified work under Kratos, although we can also do unclassified work under Kratos too. So there's a whole range of options. We even did one fully classified Kratos where the whole Kratos was classified, because it was necessary. So there's just a whole range of options to work with different sort of entities and different sorts of projects.
Oh, this is great. And we have a question here from Sarah Talano. She asks, for small companies trying to understand how to work with government, what's your best advice for government officials to help these companies?
Oh, good. By the way, hi, Sarah. How's it going? Wait, could you repeat the question one more time, Obs?
Yeah, absolutely. No, she asks, for small companies trying to understand how to work with government, what's your best advice for government officials to help those companies out?
Yeah, I would say, try to, make sure, you firmly establish who's going to be that sort of POC for those interactions. You have your office of, if you are a federal laboratory, you have an office of research and technology applications, and that's usually headed up by a person. And, that entity is known as the ORDA. And so the ORDA is really the first, it's sort of that interlocutor between the rest of the laboratory and the non-federal entities. And it's really important. The ORDA, goes through training, and they'll learn how to have those interactions with the private sector, and they'll become really, really knowledgeable on the authorities that they have at their disposal. And ORDAs also learn a lot about the business aspects of technology transfer, and how to do marketing, and sort of best practice tips. And they can attend things like the Air Force Technology Transfer Workshop and the FLC national meeting and events like that, where there's really good training on how to have those interactions.
Yeah, that's great. I mean, have there, how does this relationship kind of start? I mean, if there are companies that are seeking to, innovate in various different areas, especially in cyber, I mean, how does that even work? I mean, do they pick up the phone and call you, or I mean, how does this go?
Right. Well, so the laboratories are supposed to establish a website on the Federal Laboratory Consortium website. So every lab in the federal government is entitled to have a website up there. And so, the 67, 688, they have pages on that website. And so they usually have like contact information, like, you email this person or this organizational box and things like that. And it can also list like their sort of activities and different sort of projects that they're seeking potential collaborators on. And so the FLC website, that's a great place to go. Sometimes entities will also utilize, PIAs to advertise as well. Like, the 67, 688, I know they on TechLink, they have some of the, their patents, they have those sort of advertised. saying, hey, we're open to business to, license these, these different technologies, like, Whittler and Iris. And, US Cybercom, does a lot of advertising on Missy's Dreamport website as well, for activity, potential opportunities for collaboration. So, if you want to get in touch with Cybercom, one way is to contact, Dreamport Missy. They're a good interlocutor between, Cybercom and the outside community. And also you can contact US Cybercom's J9.
Well, that's great. Yeah, and I'll make sure that that folks have links to all of those as well, and I'll put them into the YouTube version as well, so that folks want to just go ahead and quick link to the FLC or Tech Link and places like that. We'll make sure that those are available for folks to have an easy access to those things. So that's great. Let's see, we are coming up on around the 50-minute point. And so I want to make sure that we're giving folks an opportunity to go ahead and ask any last questions that they have for Mr. Rosenberg here. I mean, obviously an expert in the field to allow some interesting things. One of the things that sort of came to mind as I was writing down notes, what are some of the more interesting companies that maybe have approached Cybercom, or even if you can mention them, I don't know, but are there people like, hey, look, we're looking at a new, quantum hardened, encryption system that we'd like to talk to you guys about? Are there companies that are working on those kinds of vectors, or how does that look?
I mean, I could mention just companies that we have, 678 have Kratos with, which are all like, most of them are publicly available. You can just, there's a report they had just came out in the spring, like for the Air Force released a report, like all the Kratos they have, except for one of them, the one that was fully classified. So I'd say those are all kind of out there. And then, but I'm not with them anymore, so I don't know if I just want to start naming them. But I'd say like, they do a whole range of activities, and yeah, they're definitely working on really cutting edge activities. Also, I know quantum, that may be more Rome Lab actually, FRLRI. I think they're working on those sorts of things, if I remember correctly.
That's really cool. Yeah, I know that's a big initiative for NSA, is to look at systems that are a little bit more resistant to encryption cracker technology. So
and also the NSA also has a really, really well established technology transfer program. It's headed by Ms. Linda Berger. She's like a living legend, and so she's really awesome. They got, I think, they got a technology transfer award actually from the Federal Laboratory Consortium just about, I think about 2 years ago, for their open source software release of Ghidra, which has now become a really widely used tool for malware reverse engineering.
That's really cool. Malware reverse engineering is a pretty exciting area to be sure. So I will leave it open here for about another minute or so. I want to thank everybody for their participation, especially you, Mr. Rosenberg. This is fantastic, Eric, to see you again. And we'll leave it open here for just a couple of seconds, and then we will go ahead and give everybody back their morning. And thank you all for joining us on this Monday.
Well, definitely, thank you so much for having me, Professor Davis. You really appreciate it. Glad to be here, and for you guys to listen to me go on and on about Kratos and stuff like that. But it is really important, to have mechanisms to allow us to interact with non-federal entities. So there's often sort of that fear of having that interaction. Like, I don't know, I don't want to get in trouble. Like, most people here just want to do their job and they want to help serve the country, but they don't want to get in trouble. And so, as a lawyer, you try to find ways to help the client, succeed in their mission, right? And just like, they're all just different tools in the toolkit. Some things Kratos are useful for, some things you have FAR contracts, sometimes you have, OTAs. You just have different tools in your toolbox, and you want to make sure you know what they are and where they match up. You have, the answer isn't like Kratos solved everything, right? It's just like, well, what's your problem? What are you trying to achieve? And then we'll match you up with what you need.
Well, outstanding. Well, thank you again so much for your time this morning. I know that you're between meetings, so very much appreciate your great talk today. We're going to have this posted to YouTube here within the next couple of days, so we'll make sure that everybody gets that link as well.
Great. Thank you so much. Appreciate your time.